Wrestling fans, are you ready? For the thousands in attendance and the millions watching around the world, let's get ready to rumble!
And now, please welcome at this time your hosts, Graham GSM Matthews and RJ Marceau. You're listening to the next era of wrestling radio. This is WrestleRant Radio.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to WrestleRant Radio here today for Thursday, August 22nd, 2024. I'm Graham GSM Matthews. Hope you guys are doing well and having a great Thursday so far. Mr. Marceau unable to join us today as he's under the weather, so best wishes to him and getting better, and hopefully we can speak to him next week. So I will be flying solo for today's show. New episodes available every single Thursday on WrestleRant.com, WrestleRantRadio.com, all the usual and your favorite podcast platforms. Rate the show, review the show, subscribe to the show. Never miss a new episode every single Thursday. We do have no shortage of topics to talk about here today between All In coming up on Sunday, the AEW Wembley show, so looking forward to talking about that. A lot of other AEW news, All In next year, some contract news, talking about some things from Raw on Monday night. Before then, though, I do want to talk a little bit about Fanatics Fest from this past weekend. I did have the opportunity to attend on Sunday, and I'm still kind of recovering, not only from that, but I was there on Sunday. I've been planning for it for months. The WWE announced it, and Fanatics announced it like many, many months ago. And I kind of had it in my mind I was going to be going. Didn't get the credential confirmation until like a week or two ahead of time, which I'll go back to in a second. But the following day, actually, because I was planning on always probably going on Sunday, because of how it worked out, I was going to a Mets game the following day with my family. My brothers and I got my dad Mets tickets to a game at Mets City Field in Queens on that Monday. So, and I'm from Connecticut, obviously, so I went on the train, and it's better than driving, because driving in New York City, I'd rather fucking die than do that. And I'm sure people who live in the city are probably thinking, oh, it's not that bad, I do it all the time. Maybe not, I don't know. I've never done it. Don't want to do it. I have driven in New York before, the state of New York, not actually New York City. You will never catch me dead doing that. So I took the train back and forth both days, which I have done a lot before. Like almost exactly 8 years ago, actually, I would have done that for SummerSlam when they were at the Barclays Center a couple years in a row. I would go back and forth. I think in 2015, I went back and forth on Saturday and Sunday. And then in 2016, 8 years ago, I think to the day actually, I went back and forth on Sunday night after SummerSlam, I stayed in like New York City with a friend of a friend. It was a really weird situation, but I did go back and forth on the train quite a bit over the course of that weekend. That was 8 or 9 years ago. I am 8 or 9 years older now. I just do not like the travel. There's nothing, not nothing, but very few things I loathe more now than travel, as far as like extensive travel. Like every time I come back from one of these trips, I just cannot stand the travel. Whether it be SummerSlam, Mania, anything else, like driving to an event is fine. I'll do that. But like flying out to an event, I'm very grateful to be there and cover it and do all that other sort of shit, obviously. But just the actual travel itself is tough. Whether it be delays or just getting to the airport, being at the airport, flying out, getting up at fucking 2, 3 a.m., whatever it might be. It's tough. I do not envy the performer. I do not envy the WWE superstars in that respect. But anyway, back to the original point. I was back and forth on Sunday and Monday, so it was a very long weekend. I am still kind of recovering from the travel and everything else I've had to do and catching up since then. But Fanatics Fest itself, again, going back to what I was talking about originally, not to stray too far off the original path here, it was a fun time. Now, when they announced it back in, I think it was after Mania, because WWE had done something similar, not with other sports organizations, obviously, but they had done WWE World. And anyone that went to WWE World, and I assume it was a lot of the same people, because that was in Philadelphia, obviously, also in the Northeast. So if you went to Mania this year, went to WWE World, you probably went to WWE Fanatics Fest as well. And I say WWE Fanatics Fest, but it wasn't really WWE Fanatics Fest. It was a combination of the MLB, NFL, NHL, soccer, like all these different organizations, UFC as well. It wasn't just like a TKO WWE thing where it was UFC superstars. I say superstars. They're not superstars. The UFC fighters and athletes and whatnot, and the WWE stars. They had a lot of people there, and they announced a lot of big names as early as like fucking May. Because I remember telling someone at the time, like, hey, I would like love to attend, and this looks cool and whatever. And they hadn't even begun to announce really who else would be there from the WWE side beyond like Cody Rhodes, Rhea Ripley, and Hulk Hogan. Yes, Hulk Hogan was there. And funnily enough, you probably saw the news reports about, oh, every WWE superstar was sold out, which is true. I think from my own experience of looking online at the autographs and the meet and greet opportunities, the photos and shit they had available to do with the superstars on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It was really Saturday, Sunday. No one was there, I don't think, from WWE on Friday. I could be wrong about that, but, WWE had SmackDown on Friday. It just kind of makes sense. They occupied Saturday and Sunday. But when I looked at everyone that was available, and they had a slew of superstars available, everyone from the aforementioned Cody Rhodes and Rhea Ripley to Jade Cargill, and Bianca might have been there. I don't think she was. I know Jade was. The Miz was there. They had CM Punk and a number of other people, Drew McIntyre. Of everyone they had advertised, I think Hulk Hogan may honestly have been the only one that was not sold out, which is pretty fucking funny, just considering it's Hulk Hogan, like one of the most world-renowned wrestlers of all time, but he's also just a racist piece of shit, especially coming off of that video, which actually surfaced after the Fanatics Fest, but that video that he did on Kamala Harris the other day, just pretty fucking racist. But anyway, I thought that was funny that he was like, I think the only one that wasn't sold out, because, and I mentioned that, I had known I was going to Fanatics Fest a while ago, so I was routinely checking to see how much each superstar was for their photos and their autographs and stuff like that. Because specifically, I wanted to go to, and this is kind of amazing, that I've never actually met Bayley before. I did over SummerSlam weekend this past August, a couple of weeks ago. And I, through the many interviews that I've done, I've interviewed her once over the phone, a few years ago, but I've never actually met her in person. She never really does the media junkets. She did at SummerSlam, so I had a chance to meet with her there and chat with her for a couple of minutes. So that was cool. So I didn't have to meet her at Fanatics Fest. LA Knight was another one. He was also there at Fanatics Fest. I was considering meeting him as well, because I've interviewed him a lot over the phone and over Zoom and shit. Have never met him in person. Also ran into him at the airport, actually. I didn't meet Bayley at the airport. I met her at the media junket over SummerSlam weekend, but I did run into LA Knight at the airport that same weekend. So I was like, okay, don't have to meet him either. Because I'm like, I don't know when the next opportunity I'll have to meet these people is. So instead, I'll only go, I'll go for the coverage and shit, but I'm saying as far as like what autographs I'll get and whatever, I'll look to get a Miz autograph and a Drew McIntyre autograph. I've met Punk before. I've met pretty much everyone else before. Jey Uso was also there. I haven't met him before, but I've interviewed him, whatever. But specifically, I want to get an autograph from them to have them sign the Intercontinental Championship replica championship belt that I have. That I talked about here on the channel and, on the podcast before and shit. I've had this belt for the last 7 years, trying to get it signed by every former WWE Intercontinental Champion that's still around. And I have yet to have it signed by Drew McIntyre and The Miz. And I've met both guys before, but haven't had them sign the championship. So I thought this would be an appropriate opportunity to do so. When I saw them advertised for the same day, mind you, a couple of weeks ago, or like even a month or so ago, I'm thinking, that's perfect. I'll go on Sunday to meet them. Of the days that I would go to, whether it be Saturday or Sunday or even Friday, I'll go on Sunday. That would make the most sense. I had seen how much they were. They announced that a couple of weeks ago. From what I understand, though, they did not put the tickets on sale to meet them a month ago. I could be completely wrong. But when I looked about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, when I got the confirmation as far as who would be there, they were already sold out. Everyone available was actually sold out. So it wasn't as if, like, okay, Miz and Drew aren't available, I'll meet this person instead. No one was available for the WWE wrestlers. Now, like I mentioned earlier, they had the conjunction with all the other sports organizations and shit. They had a lot of meet and greets available for, I think Carmelo Anthony was there, Derek Jeter, Tom Brady might have been doing stuff as well. All of these people were like very, very expensive. Allen Iverson, some names I know, a lot of which I don't, but a lot of like current and retired Hall of Fame hockey players and football players, basketball players, which was cool, baseball players from various eras of the sports. A lot of them had availability still. The WWE performers did not. So that tells me And my big takeaway from Fanatics Fest was that they underestimated how many people were actually either going to attend or buy autographs for these people. That being the WWE people. Because I have never seen in my many times of going to really anything, whether it be WWE World, and they do sell out, like even a WWE World in Philly, I didn't buy a VIP meet and greet for any of these people. But, you know, a lot of them sold out, but I think they didn't sell out as quickly as they did for Fanatics Fest. And again, that tells me they did not have enough available. Now, I know even as it was, now again, I didn't meet any of these people at Fanatics Fest over the weekend, so I've just heard from other people like the Cody Rhodes situation where he had to leave, and it wasn't a Cody Rhodes issue, he had a house show to go to, because this poor fucking guy is the ultimate company man here, where he had SmackDown on Friday, a house show on Saturday, flew from the house show on Saturday night to Fanatics Fest for Sunday morning, and then flew out of Fanatics Fest on Sunday afternoon, morning, whatever, to go to a house show on Sunday somewhere else. It wasn't in the Northeast, I forgot where it was. So just the ultimate hustler, that being Cody Rhodes. In a good way, that is. And I guess while he was there, the system went down. Like the system they used to process the meet and greets and all this other shit, it went down. So Cody Rhodes had to go. A lot of people didn't get to meet him. I think he may have met up to like the first, second, maybe third group, because they had him in groups, I guess. Again, I didn't buy one, so I don't know. And then he had to leave. I had heard that happened with other people as well. Not that they had to leave, but like, I guess it was just a mess. I've heard from a couple other people. To me, it looked like it went well, but I don't know from that specific standpoint, so they do have to fix that for the future. The Cody Rhodes thing, it's a big deal, because obviously you pay to meet Cody Rhodes, and then you get fucked, because not just because he has to leave, but because the system goes down and whatever. I mean, that shit happens, but if it happened with a couple other superstars, that's kind of a problem. So I can't really speak to that specifically, because I did not have that happen to me. If it did happen to me, I would have been disappointed, but, you know, electronic shit happens. And from what I understand, for the people that could not meet Cody, they either allowed them to meet someone else of equal value or lesser value or whatever, or you just pay the difference, or they just gave you a refund, which, again, that's not what you went there for, because a lot of people traveled a very long way to meet some of these people, and just to get a refund doesn't make up for the cost of the flight and your travel and all this other shit. So I totally get that. I completely understand the frustration there. That is on Fanatics Fest. That is not on Cody Rhodes or anyone that they were not able to meet that day. So they do need to work on that. I don't know if the other athletes experienced that same issue. I would assume not. But it looked like the WWE people had a longer line than anyone else there. And the lines were not 10 people short, but like the windows of which they had the superstars doing the signings and the pictures, it was not long enough. Typically they're a little bit longer, and I'm not saying they should be there for 4 or 5 fucking hours, but typically the windows at the other WWE events are a little bit longer, but I guess because they had them shorter, they wanted them to do the panels and stuff and other shit that was going on at the Fanatics Fest, because they also had panels and talk shows with the Ringer show, like the Masked Men Wrestling show, whatever it's called. They had Sam Roberts up there, maybe Peter Rosenberg, I could be wrong about that, but they had a few other people like doing interviews with some of these stars, whether it be Rhea, Rey Mysterio, Drew McIntyre, CM Punk, and a lot of content came from those interviews that people were talking about on Twitter and social media that the wrestling news websites ran with over the weekend and whatnot, so it was a big success for WWE. Like, as far as the money they made from it, and they also had the college championship belts they just announced and came out with, actually. They were on sale at Fanatics Fest, or at least they were on display. I didn't attempt to buy one, so I'm not sure, but it looked like you could buy them. They had a couple of people there, and they weren't just for display. You could actually buy them in person, along with the other, like the Red Sox championship belt and the Celtics title belt and shit like that. Like, you could also buy those there, and they've had those on sale for quite a while now. But yeah, no, I thought that was cool, and everything else seemed to be really, really well run. I think, obviously, the main thing of what people went for, that being the autographs and the pictures, there may have been issues with that. I didn't really see that firsthand, like I said, but I've heard from enough people who had said that it was a mess in terms of how it was run. They just got, I mean, this was the first one of its kind. WWE's done a lot of stuff before, but this was in Fanatics' hand, not WWE's hands. I mean, WWE obviously had a hand in it, but the overall event was run by Fanatics and not WWE. So, WWE, from what I've experienced in WWE World and other meet and greets and shit, tend to run their stuff a lot more smoothly. That was not the case on Saturday from what people had said, or at least on Sunday. Saturday might have been a different issue, so I'm not sure. But I think the overall concept of Fanatics Fest and WWE's involvement was really cool. And I think if they do it again, and they definitely should, they need to do a better job of not underestimating the WWE involvement. They try to keep it equal as far as what looked like the lines for this guy, like this retired hockey player, and the line for Rhea Ripley and Bayley and people like that. But the truth of the matter is, a lot of people that were there for the wrestlers. There was a lot of people there that were not there for the wrestlers, and they were there for the sports stuff. But WWE fans are a lot like, it's like a Comic-Con. Like, they will, like, to me, more, not even like there's not diehard sports fans, but at least in my opinion, I am not a diehard sports fan, but I feel like a diehard WWE fan is more likely to come out to what Fanatics did with Fanatics Fest than a diehard baseball fan or a football fan. Like, they may want to go meet Derek Jeter. I don't know if they're going to want to pay fucking $500 to meet these people, but maybe they will. I don't know, to sign their jersey or their baseball card or whatever. I just feel like WWE fans are much more like, I will be there. If my favorite's going to be there, I will fucking be there in line day one. And that's why I feel like a majority of the turnout they had for this thing was WWE people, and why all of those people sold out. So they don't need to just have a WWE world like they did in Philadelphia and only have WWE people. They can have other sports stars. I thought it was cool they did have these other sports stars there, and it was a big success on social media. I saw a lot of people talking about it, and there were other people, like there were a lot of people using the other activation centers is what they called it, as far as like trying out stuff that the NFL section had available and the MLB section had available. Like the giant exhibits they had were actually pretty fucking cool. That's, I think, where they really went right, and they did a great job with that sort of shit. I didn't try most of them. Like the baseball one, they would throw you wiffle balls, and you could hit the wiffle ball out in like a small outfield that kids can go catch. I mean, it was more of a little kids thing. I saw adults doing it, and some guys were missing every single fucking pitch, whereas some kids were knocking it out of the park. That was pretty funny, but that was cool. They had like a 100-meter dash or whatever it was in the NFL center, where you could pretend, race your friends and run into a crash pad. That was cool. They had that. You could shoot hoops, in the NBA, section that they had available. And the UFC section was kind of underwhelming. They had an octagon available. That was cool. Like, you could go inside the octagon. They had a line for it. You could take a picture inside of it, and then like pose for pictures. Like, I saw people, I don't know if this was like an every person thing or if they had you do this, but when I walked by a couple times, and they had like the giant UFC championship that you could take a picture with, like the giant WWE title they have outside of WWE headquarters. They had something similar to that outside of some of these exhibits, and that was cool. But for the UFC one, you could go inside the octagon, and the pictures I saw some people taking of like them doing holds and shit to their friend or their partner, like, it was interesting. I just don't think it makes for a great picture. And they had someone else there that was like acting to be a referee. I don't know if there was someone that was already part of the exhibit or if that was someone in that friend group. I don't know. But it seemed a little strange because I'm thinking, yeah, it's cool to like reenact holds and stuff, but it's like, does that really make for the greatest picture? Like, I don't know. But I thought the fact they had an octagon there was cool. They didn't really have a whole lot of like memorabilia there for these other activation centers beyond WWE. WWE's, they had a lot of shit there. They had like the CM Punk, I don't know if it was the exact shirt, probably not, but they had like a makeup of CM Punk's gear and the shirt that he was wearing the night that he cut the pipe bomb promo, and Triple H's WrestleMania 31 attire, not only the gear, but like the fucking headpiece that he wore to the ring that night. I think it was WrestleMania 31, like the Terminator shit that he was doing, among other, attires and stuff like that, like a Rock jacket, one of the jackets that The Rock wore one time. Like, it's a lot of the same stuff they had at WWE World. But I thought it was set up very well. The entrance that they had available for people to make was the real big hit of the weekend, I thought. Even people that were not wrestling fans, that I sat behind at like in the media room, that were there to cover like the MMA shit, they were talking about how cool it was that WWE had this make an entrance thing, which WWE's had at their Access stuff for many, many years now. I've never had a chance to do it. I would look like a complete fucking loser trying to do it. I still want to try it at some point. I would look like a dork, I promise you. But maybe at some point I will try to one of these events. It's just that the line is always long, so it's not always worth it when you could be doing other things and other stuff and whatever. But that was a real big hit, and watching people make their entrances, no matter how great it was or how realistic it was or how cringy they were, seeing people make their entrance was cool, and I was there for a little while, people watching people making their entrance and shit, so that was cool too. And that was really the best part of the entire Fanatics Fest was that was by far the best activation. The other ones didn't really have nearly the same amount of people waiting in line for it, and the same amount of people waiting around it and shit like that. But WWE had a massive presence. I thought it was a massive success from that standpoint, probably in terms of the money they made from it, in terms of the amount of people they got to go. There were a lot of people there. Wasn't the same amount of people that you would see for like a New York Comic-Con. This was at the Javits Center. I forgot to mention that earlier, but it was in New York City at the Javits Center, I believe is how you pronounce it. It's the same place where they have New York Comic-Con every year, and I've been there 3 years in a row. And that, at least on the days that I've gone, on the Fridays and the Saturdays and shit, the fucking turnout for that is just ridiculous. Just completely fucking ridiculous. This was like a quarter of that, even if that. But like to use Fanatics Fest as an opportunity to do big events, like they also had the Mike Tyson, Jake Paul press conference on Sunday when I was there. And I got a chance to attend that. That was really cool to watch live. Wasn't, the most exciting thing because it took a while to get going and getting people inside was kind of a mess, but it was cool and people were standing the whole time, so it was kind of tough to say. They should have regulated that a little bit better. But the fact they even had it at Fanatics Fest was actually pretty cool, and I would assume it's streamed online somewhere. But I thought that was really, really well done. So, again, I hope they do Fanatics Fest in the future. There are some things that kind of have to, ease out detail-wise as far as, like, the, meet and greets go, and electronically people getting to meet who they want to meet. And again, the Cody Rhodes having to leave thing was not Cody Rhodes' fault at all, to reiterate that. That was on Fanatics and their system. And again, shit happens, but when you're on a time crunch and some of these people have to leave, it does fuck over the fans. If you have to wait an extra hour or so, like I've been in that situation before, it is what it is. People have to, people arrive late, they have to leave early. It is what it is. But at the same time, though, when it comes to like stuff like that, they really should be doing a better job of that, because for someone to pay to meet their favorite superstar, and they came from a long way to do so, and then they don't, and then they aren't able to, that really sucks. But I think my top takeaway as far as the WWE stuff goes, they need to do a better job of not underestimating the WWE, the involvement and just the amount of people that will show up for the WWE stuff specifically. Have more WWE involvement. Like the talk show was cool, but like the area where they had Rhea Ripley on stage talking to Sam Roberts and shit like that, Paul Heyman was also there. The space that they had it for was so fucking small. Like I didn't even stand around to watch it because the space was just standing room only. And like the theater that they had the press conference in had seating, and it always has. I mean, that part of the Javits Center always has seating. But just do it there then, if you can. They tried to do a lot, and the WWE stuff was kind of regulated to a certain section of the building, and that had more people in it than anything else aside from the press conference, from what I saw. Like they were I think they were doing other shit in the theater before the, before the press conference. I don't know what the amount of people, that were there for that, but they should try to do more talk shows inside the theater as opposed to doing like a pop-up stand where people are just standing around for fucking 30 minutes and you can barely see, and it's kind of hard to make out because there's just, as far as like the flow of people, it wasn't really well organized as far as that goes. But again, that's just merely nitpicking. So I hope they do it again in New York City. They could do it elsewhere too. Maybe they can, I was going to say they could do it around a WrestleMania or a SummerSlam, but at the same time, though, I think Fanatics Fest can stand on its own. Maybe they could do like a WWE UFC Fanatics Fest around WrestleMania weekend, but that's basically what they did with WWE World, and that was already massively successful with the Superstore that they have and the entrances and the other shit they have available to do at WWE World this past year. For the amount of, for the price that you pay for it, I think WWE World was a better ticket. If you're a big wrestling fan, there wasn't as much stuff to do if you're solely a wrestling fan to do it like Fanatics Fest. But, the ticket I think was like on average $50 for a single day adult or whatever it was. I think they could do a better job of organizing that. But beyond that, though, I think it did go pretty well, and I hope they do it again in the future. So moving on from that, talking about Raw for Monday before we talk a lot of AEW news in the latter half of the show. Few things from Raw I did want to bring up. And yes, I did watch the show on Monday. I mentioned I was at a Mets game. I tried to simultaneously multitask by being at the Mets game and also watching Raw on my phone. That sounds completely fucking ridiculous, but it was either that or watching it the next day, which I didn't, just with the time and shit, it just didn't really work out. That would not have been the best idea, so I did have to multitask by watching Raw on my phone while also being at the game, which they won, so it worked out well. But one of the top talking points from the show on Monday night was CM Punk's promo and segment with Drew McIntyre. They had a face-off of sorts where they confirmed their strap match for the Bash in Berlin pay-per-view next weekend. We kind of figured that after Punk whipped McIntyre with the strap last week on Raw. So they made that official. But Punk, before McIntyre came out, was basically what people were calling, he was in pandering mode. He was pandering to the audience, talking about Fanatics Fest and the big success that WWE, like the hot roll that they're on right now, the hot streak that WWE finds itself on at the moment. He was talking about that and thanking the audience and how much it means to him and stuff like that. It was very reminiscent of the early promos he was cutting in AEW when he first debuted there about almost exactly 3 years ago, actually. He had his first appearance in AEW 3 years ago yesterday or the other day, I think on Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, he was very much in pandering mode on Monday night. Before McIntyre came out, they went back and forth about the bracelet. On the whole, it was certainly one of the weaker segments they have had since the feud started back in January. For sure, like they've definitely had much hotter segments with better verbiage and material to work with. It kind of feels like right now they're in a placeholder mode because it really feels like we're building to a third match. Like the strap match should be good, and I'm looking forward to it. Not exactly sure who's going to go over, but we could talk about predictions next week on the show. It feels like for now they just want to get past the second match of the Bash in Berlin pay-per-view. They just want to get past it so they can get to the third match of Bad Blood, that probably being inside Hell in the Cell. So they don't really have a lot to work with right now. The bracelet stuff I've talked about before doesn't really bother me because I think it's not about the bracelet itself, but rather what it represents. But then he also said that he wants the bracelet back. He mentioned that on Monday. He said, you know, if I give you your strap match or I give you a strap match, can you give me back my bracelet? Blah, blah, blah. Obviously, Drew did not do that. Punk will have to beat him down and take that bracelet back, maybe even at Bash in Berlin. Hopefully it is at Bash in Berlin because I'm not sure how many more promos I can endure of them talking about the fucking bracelet, which, again, it's been fine up to this point, but it does get to a point where it's been a few months now, and if that's all they're talking about, I know they have different stages of the story. Hopefully it goes back to being a blood feud and not just talking about a bracelet. Again, it is about what it represents. I've talked about that before, but it does feel like they're kind of in repetition mode for now. That being said, but like the pandering promo that people were criticizing, I didn't really have a big issue with it. Just let the man be happy for 5 minutes. I mean, I know we all want like angry CM Punk, and heel CM Punk I think is inevitable in this company. We will get heel CM Punk at some point. It is wild to think we have not gotten heel CM Punk in over 10 fucking years. Unless you count CM Punk at the All Out 2022 press conference as heel CM Punk. Beyond real life heel CM Punk, we have not gotten on TV heel CM Punk in well over 10 years. It looked like he was kind of leaning tweener last summer in AEW, but they never really went full-fledged heel with him. And he kind of let people cheer him if they want, boo him if they want, whatever. But they never really went full-blown heel. And then he left before he got fired, before they could really turn him heel. Then he came back to WWE and he's been getting massive reactions, so you're not going to turn him heel right off the bat. But at some point he will be a heel. But the last time he was a heel was around the time that he was feuding with The Undertaker, actually, back in 2013. Because when he came back from his hiatus to feud with Brock Lesnar that summer, he was a babyface. So, heel CM Punk is the best CM Punk. I thoroughly enjoy babyface Punk. It does have a shorter shelf life. But, I mean, the one promo on Monday will not kill Punk's momentum. I feel like people were freaking the fuck out about Punk being overly happy and over-the-top smiley and thanking the fans, and I don't doubt anything that he said was legit about the interactions that he had with fans at Fanatics Fest and people thanking him and whatever. I'm sure that was 1,000% legit. The entire promo, again, was not the most heated promo. It felt like it didn't have a whole lot of heat behind it, and the crowd didn't really know how to react when it was over. But like babyface Punk being in pandering mode, again, if he's doing it every single fucking week, that could be a problem. But for 1 week, I didn't really think it was a big deal, to be completely honest. Then, yeah, I'm a Punk fan, so it might sound biased, I suppose, but I don't really feel like one promo is going to kill CM Punk. Oh, this is the Fed version of CM Punk. This is the corporate CM Punk, blah, 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 and all this other bullshit. Like, again, he's been back for almost a year now, and a lot of the promos that he's been cutting have been angry and intense, and maybe not the first few weeks that he was back. Like that first promo that he cut when he was back on that first Raw when he returned back in November was kind of meh. But like a lot of the subsequent promos, like the interactions with Rollins and the interactions with McIntyre, among other people, have been fucking great. And he had one off week or 1 week where he wasn't, fuming with rage I really don't think it was that big of a deal. I think we'll be back on the right path hopefully next week on Raw, and maybe he wins at Bash in Berlin, maybe he does not, we don't know. But we are headed for a third match at Bad Blood. Hopefully they kind of pick back up the steam with the storyline as we head into that pay-per-view in early October, and we could see really angry CM Punk, and they had that heated match that people were hoping to see at SummerSlam. Also from Raw, we saw Bronson Reed beat The Miz in a no disqualification match. Fun match, Reed again going over decisively, a lot like he did last week. Before he could hit more tsunami splashes on The Miz afterward, out comes, who would have thought, Braun Strowman. And I'll tell you who would have thought, myself and Mr. Marceau. We literally just talked about this last week or the week before, whichever one. But I've been saying this for well over a year now. I've been thinking this for well over a year now. Braun and Bronson Reed is the way to go. Not because it's going to be any sort of 5-star Mac Classic, not by any means. But this is how you can get Bronson Reed over, or at least attempt to. I'm not saying he'll emerge from this feud or this match a 10 times bigger star, but it's better than him working with the same 4 or 5 people on the undercard and not really getting any more over by beating the Akira Tozawas and the Otises and people like that. He needs to be put with someone that is actually over. Regardless of what you think of Braun Strowman, the guy is a perennial fan favorite in this company at this point. He is cemented as a fan favorite. You could turn him heel if you want to as well, but he works well in that monster babyface role. And he hasn't done a whole lot since coming back to the company 2 years ago, but he doesn't really need to. They've put him in spots where he can shine against even Omos, and they had a much better than expected match at Crown Jewel a couple of years ago. But they put him in that tag team with Ricochet for a little while, and he was out injured for about a year, but he's come back and worked with the Judgment Day, among other people, and he gets great reactions from the audience. You put him with Bronson Reed can ideally beat him and get more over in the process. He is the perfect person to be working with Bronson Reed until Seth Rollins returns, which may not be anytime soon. It could be in a couple of months. It could be in a month. We don't know. We don't know how long Rollins is going to be out for. He did come back from his injury hiatus, post-WrestleMania within 2 months. And then, he came back in June, and then he was back for 2 months. He only worked all of one match, granted, at Money in the Bank, but he was back for a little bit, and he can't be that hurt if he was able to work that one match. But maybe he's out for a month, maybe he's out for another 2 weeks, we don't know. But we do know that Bronson Reed and Rollins is not happening at Bash in Berlin. That would be too soon. They are doing Bronson Reed and Braun Strowman next week on Raw. And someone sent in a question, a hashtag on Wednesday, about when they do Bronson Reed and Braun Strowman, is it possible that could be where they do the break the ring spot? And I had said that it's been long enough to where I think it would be okay. Now, WWE has done it, to my knowledge, 3 times. Once in 2003 for the first time with Big Show and Brock Lesnar. Obviously, that's the most famous one. That's the best one. They did it again in 2011 with Mark Henry and Big Show. All 3 involve Big Show, by the way, because he's fucking 400 or 500 pounds. So they did it again in 2011 with Mark Henry and Big Show. And they did it again in 2017 with Big Show and Braun Strowman. So this would also involve Braun Strowman, but it would be cool to see Bronson Reed, do a suplex to Braun Strowman off the top rope. And they're not quite the same size as, Big Show and Brock. I mean, Brock's even really not 500 pounds. I think Bronson Reed is probably the same weight as Brock Lesnar, just in a different form. And even, Mark Henry isn't 500 pounds. I mean, he was pretty big, but, he's probably around the same weight of what Bronson Reed is. So I think it would be believable if the ring broke during their match on Monday. I think that'd be the best way to further that feud, as opposed to just blowing it off within a week. You had Braun Strowman confront Bronson Reed I'm going to get confused with the Bronson and the Braun Strowman, whatever. You had Braun Strowman confront Bronson Reed for the first time on Monday's Raw. You're going right to the first match next week. They don't have to blow it off that soon. They could do a non-finish. They could do the break the ring spot. I'm not advocating that they do it, but it would make sense if they did to kind of, lead the feud alive, allow Braun to not take a loss, and also disallow Bronson Reed from taking a loss. It would be way too soon in his renewed singles push to be taking a loss. So he should not be losing. You could do a DQ. That's probably the way that they'll go. But I don't even really want to see Bronson Reed beating Braun Strowman clean quite yet. They could build to that a little bit later down the road, depending on when Rollins will be back. If Rollins isn't back for another month, they can stretch this out, drag it out, milk it for another month. They don't have to immediately end it on Monday's Raw. So I like the direction they're going with Bronson Reed. This is exactly what I was hoping they would do. Braun Strowman isn't busy right now. I don't think we've even seen him on Raw since he was working with Damian Priest maybe on Raw about a month ago. I think it was right before Money in the Bank or whatever it was. They had a non-title match when Damian Priest was still the World Heavyweight Champion. I don't know if Braun Strowman's been on Raw since then. So bringing him back to come into the aid of The Miz and hopefully work with Bronson Reed for more than one match definitely makes sense to me. It was also Pat McAfee's final night on Raw for at least a little while. He's off to, do his whole college football duty broadcasting thing that he did last year as well. I know what people had mentioned, why can't he just still do Raw? Because last year was conflicting with SmackDown being on Fridays and the college game day stuff on Saturdays. How can he not do both? Well, I mean, I know this is Raw and it's a couple days later. It's still probably a lot of travel for him, among other stuff he might be doing around that time during college football season. So not overly surprising that he's going to be cycled out of the Raw commentary duo for now. I think Michael Cole will report to SmackDown either starting next week. I don't know exactly what the deal is. Because I think Joe Tessitore, I thought he was starting in early September. Next week is not September. Let's not rush it. I think he might be starting on Monday's Raw. I'm not exactly sure. And if he's not starting on the Labor Day edition, they might have someone like The Miz or whatever do commentary instead alongside Michael Cole. I think when Joe Tessitore goes to Raw, because ultimately he will go to SmackDown, Michael Cole will be back on Raw for the Netflix debut in January. Michael Cole, in the meantime, will be on SmackDown. So they haven't exactly clarified what the commentary duos are going to be. I would imagine if Pat McAfee's gone, Joe Tessitore's coming in, Michael Cole's going to SmackDown, then he will probably call SmackDown, I would imagine, with Barrett, who he was calling Raw with before Pat McAfee came back. It's probably going to be Michael Cole and Wade Barrett, and then on Raw, it's going to be Corey Graves and Joe Tessitore, would be my guess. And then when Raw goes to Netflix, Joe Tessitore goes to SmackDown, and Michael Cole goes back to Raw. So it would then be Joe Tessitore and Wade Barrett and Corey Graves and Michael Cole on Raw. So they have a lot of commentary changes constantly. They are constantly changing the teams and whatnot. But that would seem to make the most sense as far as what the commentary teams are going to be for the next little while. They did tease more tension between the New Day on Monday's Raw during their six-man tag team win. Odyssey Jones, and not Big E, obviously, but it was Odyssey Jones, Xavier Woods, and Kofi Kingston, toppling the Final Testament, Karrion Kross, and the Authors of Pain in a six-man tag team match. The outcome wasn't really in doubt. I was hoping the Final Testament could win. The feud is indeed over. They didn't really gain much from the feud, but they did put in motion the idea of Kofi and Woods not being on the same page. And Woods did bring up to Kofi on Monday, hey, I'm not exactly thrilled over the fact that you brought in Odyssey Jones and agreed to team with him without consulting me first. And now, I thought that segment where they kind of cleared the air backstage before the bout would be the end of the tension, but it wasn't, because Kofi attempted to tag in Xavier during the match. Great camera shot, too, where Odyssey Jones jumps on the ring apron and takes the tag instead. And it wasn't framed as, we stole the tag from Xavier Woods and Kofi didn't mean to tag him in. Kofi simply tagged him in because he was closer, because Odyssey Jones was closer. Maybe he would not have made it to Xavier Woods in time. Xavier did not see it that way, though. When Odyssey Jones ran in the ring to do his flurry of offense, Woods was just kind of standing still on the apron with this shocked look on his face, like this frustrated look of like, why didn't he tag me? I'm his longtime tag team partner of 10 years. Why would he not have just tagged me? And again, Odyssey was closer, and maybe if he brings that up to Kofi next week or whenever, if ever, he can say that. They can acknowledge, well, Odyssey was closer in that moment, so why would you be bothered by that? So there are still some underlying teases of tension there. They also kind of did the same thing on Raw Talk, where Odyssey and Kofi were all over the top, excited with their win. Xavier was, he said, everything's great, but he wasn't in the same mood, in the same mode that Kofi and Odyssey were. So maybe they still are teasing, and maybe the split is still coming. I hope so. And it doesn't necessarily have to be Xavier just, again, turning heel on Kofi and turning heel on Odyssey Jones. It could be as simple as Xavier saying, listen, I need some distance. We've been doing the New Day thing for a decade now. You've been WWE Champion, Kofi. Big E's been WWE Champion. I've been King of the Ring, but it's not quite the same as being the WWE Champion. I need to go off on my own and prove myself for a little while. So again, he may not go heel, but they could separate. He could volunteer to go to SmackDown or just go on a singles run on Raw, and they can team occasionally whenever the situation arises. But they can go their separate ways for a bit, and Kofi can continue to work with Odyssey and help get him over and get him more experience and whatever, and Xavier could have this renewed singles run. So I would like to see that. Hopefully that is still the end game, because if they stick together still as the New Day as it currently is, that's fine. They're a great team, but they've been together for so long now that the New Day in its current state staying as it is fucking boring. It's stagnant. So doing some sort of a split or, again, it doesn't have to be a full-blown heel turn. I feel like those days are over. I feel like the time to do that would have been like 5 years ago, and they never really went in that direction, and that's totally fine. They don't have to full-on split, but they did have Big E go off on his own as the WWE champion when Kofi and Xavier were on Raw. Big E actually went to Raw as the WWE champion. Kofi and Xavier went to SmackDown. So you could do the same thing where Woods goes off on his own, and Odyssey doesn't have to be, a member of the New Day necessarily, but he can work with Kofi and they can team if you don't want to use Kofi on his own. So just an idea. One more thing from Raw, we had a pretty good main event between Randy Orton and Ludwig Kaiser. The outcome was never really in doubt. Kaiser was never going to win. Orton will be challenging Gunther for the World Heavyweight Championship at Bash in Berlin this weekend, or rather next weekend. All In is this weekend, one pay-per-view at a time, I guess. But Kaiser, again, looking really, really good in defeat here. He had another great match with Sheamus a couple of weeks ago. It's been consistently great performances from Kaiser. And I think he's carried himself really, really well, especially on the mic and in vignettes and in promos and stuff like that. He's still aligned with Gunther, and that's why this match happened, because he helped Gunther attack Orton at the beginning of the show. And then Orton beat Kaiser here, laid out Gunther afterward, which did not air on television. They ran out of time, so I think they did it after the show went off the air, before Orton posed for the World Heavyweight Championship belt. But it was still a good match, and Kaiser looking really, really good in defeat. The timing was interesting, though, because on the Undertaker's podcast, he heavily praised Kaiser as someone who he had an extensive chat with recently, and he sees a lot of big things in his future as well. Obviously, that's a hell of an endorsement coming from The Undertaker, so hopefully they can capitalize on the momentum he has right now and push him towards bigger and better things on his own in singles competition. Now, on to the AEW news. Before we talk about All In for this year, we got to talk about All In for next year first. They did announce this last week, All In coming to Dallas at the Global Life Field in July 2025. I think its capacity is around 45,000 max. It will be interesting to see if they can fill the whole venue. I talked about this ad nauseum in the last week. We talked about it last week on Hashtag and this week on Hashtag. So I talked about it quite a bit already. Not necessarily here on WrestleRant Radio. Maybe with Mr. Marceau, I think we may have briefly spoke about it. But I think at that point it wasn't yet made official that they would be running Global Life Field in July 2025. Now, it is interesting. Tony Khan did mention at the press conference when they announced this thing that they will be returning to Wembley Stadium for All In 2026. So they ran Wembley last year. They ran Wembley this year. They're running Wembley in 2 years. So it's not as if they see the attendance going down for Wembley, because it is drastically down this year compared to last year. That is certainly the case. But it's not as if they saw that and said, we got to go even lower for next year, but we'll do it in the States and we'll move All In around to different venues. It sounds like All In will be staying in London for the next few years, if not permanently for good at Wembley, if not another venue or whatever. But just solely next year, they're moving out of Wembley. Now, why could that be? Now, the biggest speculation is, and this has yet to be confirmed, the WWE could be running Wembley for SummerSlam 2025. Now, we don't know where SummerSlam 2025 is, and it was even strange a couple of months ago when WWE announced SummerSlam is headed to Minnesota. Not for this year, not even for next year, but in 2 years. Now, why would they do that? If SummerSlam for this year was already set for Cleveland, I get it. Why not announce it for 2025? And I don't think they're going to be running Indianapolis for SummerSlam next year because they're running Indianapolis for the Royal Rumble. So I don't think they do the same city in 2 years. Indianapolis is getting the Rumble, Mania, and SummerSlam over the course of the next number of years. So I don't think they would run the same city twice in the same year when they can always give it to them in like 2027 or whatever. But they already announced 2026 for Minnesota. So it didn't really leave a lot of obvious options, and we may know now it could be London. Now they did run Wembley specifically for SummerSlam back in 1992. That was the last time they ran Wembley. They've done a couple London shows since then. They've had a takeover there. They did Money in the Bank there last year, which was a great show. So they've run London a few times, not for a ton of major pay-per-views, but they've done it a few times, and obviously for a lot of Raws and SmackDowns and house shows and live tours and shit like that. But it looks like they might be back for SummerSlam specifically, the first time that one of the big four will be out of the country. Maybe since then? It's been a long time. I mean, when I say out of the country, I'm including Canada. That's not the United States, obviously. I guess I should say the continent. It's out of North America. So that would mark the first time that any of the big four, maybe even including Survivor Series as well, would be outside of America, or North America at least, and would be in London. So we'll see. That was over 30 years ago. That was 1992. So by next year, that's going to be 33 years ago, which is nuts. That would be really cool. So that is something to keep an eye on. Can AEW fill Global Life Field? I mean, I'm kind of skeptical. I've said this before, and I would love to be proven wrong. You got to go off of facts. I mean, if they struggle to fill a Dynamite in Texas, I know this is their pay-per-view debut, which is different. I totally get that. This is a far bigger event that people would come from out of Texas to come see, as if it's their WrestleMania. I get that. And even if it does 40,000, that's bigger than a lot of WrestleManias from many, many years ago. Again, I get it. But if they can't fill a Dynamite in Texas with 5,000 people, it's going to be tough to stretch it to 40. Now, again, it's going to be more than just people from Texas. It's going to be people from all over the country, all over the world coming to see the show. But I think it entirely depends on what the buzz around the product is at that given time. Because right now, the buzz isn't really there. And there's a lot of reasons, and we talked about it on hashtag yesterday, as to why the all-in attendance is down this year compared to last year. And it should be a great show this weekend, which we'll talk about momentarily when I give my predictions. But the attendance is pretty noticeably down from what it was last year. Now, you can't do another first ever. That was their first ever show in the UK, and it was a massive success. You can't repeat that success. And still, 50,000, 55,000, whatever it's going to be for this weekend is still a very big number. But that's also because they don't get a lot of AEW wrestling over there. In the States, we get AEW wrestling all the time, including in Texas for a lot of like Ring of Honor's had a couple pay-per-views there. I think they had their most recent pay-per-view in Texas. Now, that's not AEW, but they did have AEW talent on those shows. It's worth mentioning. They do a lot of Dynamites and Collisions and shit like that in Texas. So, I don't know. Again, people will come from all over for that show, but I do think trying to stretch it to 40,000 when they can barely fill even the fucking Arthur Ashe Stadium with 10,000 people every year for Grand Slam at this point, it's going to be tough to do the same thing for All In next year. But again, like I said, I would love to be wrong. 2 contract notes before we get into the predictions for All In. Ricky Starks could soon be a free agent if he isn't already. There was a lot of chatter about Ricky Starks this past week, and per Fightful, there is no concrete info out there on Ricky's status with AEW or WWE. It's pretty possible that apparently he could have already been a free agent as of July, and if he isn't already signed with WWE, that he soon will be. Now, WWE's got a lot of big shows coming up, specifically with NXT in the next couple of months. They have No Mercy next weekend, the day after Bash in Berlin. I think on September 1st is the date for that show. They have Halloween Havoc at the end of October, but before then and after No Mercy, they have their debut on the CW. The 2 arena shows that they announced for Chicago on October 1st and St. Louis on October 8th. CM Punk will be on the first one. Randy Orton will be on the second one. The first one will be their debut on the CW. I can totally see Ricky Starks not even being advertised for that show and showing up in front of that crowd at the Allstate Arena and getting a great reaction for his NXT debut. I could totally see them holding out until then. Now, that's not for another 5 to 6 weeks, but I could totally see them holding out until then to make that a very big deal. And then maybe announcing his first match for the following week in St. Louis and having that be like the big draw for that show. Ricky Starks' NXT in-ring debut. So Ricky Starks is one I could totally see showing up on one of those shows. Lucha Bros are also probably WWE bound at this point. We've talked about them quite a bit in the last couple of months here on the show. But if it wasn't already apparent, they are on their way out of AEW, and they haven't been on the show in a couple of weeks. PAC actually on Saturday, this week on Collision, is having a qualifying match for the London ladder match at All In, where the winners will qualify for the AEW World Trios match, for the AEW World Trios Championship. Obviously, it's a ladder match. So he's going to be teaming with the BCC's Claudio Castagnoli and Wheeler Yuta. Like, what a random fucking team. You know what I mean? Like, he walked out on the BCC, actually, in Blood and Guts about a year ago, leading to PAC and Claudio on the Death Before Dishonor pay-per-view for the Ring of Honor World Championship last summer. And then Claudio and PAC also had a match in the Owen Hart Cup a couple of months ago. So there really is no real reason for them to be teaming against Top Flight and Leo Rush in Saturday's Collision. And they probably will win that match. So PAC will want to be on that show. And I guess he could have been in the Casino Gauntlet. I guess he still could be. Assuming they are winning that match on Saturday. But why not have him team with the 2 guys that he's been teaming with for 4 years now in Penta and Phoenix? Well, it's because they're on their way out. And apparently they didn't want to do business on their way out, which makes very little sense. That would have been the perfect finale for them as Death Triangle. Maybe, they lose and then they walk out on PAC, but we're not even getting that. He's teaming with 2 random guys instead. So if it wasn't already apparent, they probably are WWE bound. And I saw the report about Phoenix's contract AEW could freeze it or add more time because Phoenix has been out for so long, injured on and off for the past number of years. But I feel like that would just be so unnecessary. They could technically legally do that, as WWE's done in the past to other superstars. But what's really gained from that? If you're not going to use the guy and he doesn't want to be there, again, if it was a bigger deal, then maybe, but if he's headed to WWE regardless, then why the fuck not? You know what I mean? Just let him go with his brother and get him off the roster and bring in more people that would rather be there at this point. So they're probably headed to WWE. Motor City Machine Guns are another two that we've talked about here on the show before amongst their contract talk, and there's been a ton of it in the last couple of months. They could be and should be WWE bound soon. Did they head to the main roster? NXT first? Well, again, they could load up NXT with the Motor City Machine Guns as well in early October, along with the Lucha Bros. That's a pretty big influx of talent between Ricky Starks and the Motor City Machine Guns and Penta and Phoenix as the Lucha Bros. Not to mention Ethan Page being signed a couple of months ago, Joe Henry being utilized right now even while he's under TNA contract amongst the other TNA talent they're using as part of the crossover. NXT's in a pretty good spot heading into their CW debut, I would say, this fall. So that's one to keep an eye on. Saraya's contract also reported to be up soon per Fightful. She did debut in AEW back in September of 2022 at Grand Slam, so it would make sense if her contract was soon set to expire with the company. The question is not only whether she will resign or whether she'll move on, it's also if AEW should resign her, because she really hasn't had the most overly eventful run in AEW in the past 2 years. Now, her debut garnered a pretty big reaction at Grand Slam at Arthur Ashe Stadium. She did form the Outcast, she did win the AEW Women's World Championship, but the Outcasts were pretty much a failure. Ruby Soho got pregnant, she broke off on her own. Toni Storm's obviously gone on to much bigger and better things, as Timeless Toni is AEW Women's World Champion than whenever she was with the Outcasts. And her own run as Women's World Champion lasted all of like a month or two. Not even if that, probably like a good 5 or 6 weeks. So her matches haven't been bad, some have been better than others, but she really hasn't been the game changer that some, and even including myself, thought she might be when she arrived in the division 2 years ago. And again, she's had a decent run, but is it worth re-signing her? I mean, that's up to the company. Can they do better with her moving forward? She's been a babyface very briefly. She's been a heel for a majority of the time. Can they try with her again as a babyface? I don't know. I don't know if that would be the better role for her. Some of her promos have been a bit rough. They were as a babyface early on. Her heel promos haven't really been much better. She comes across as a very annoying character in the show, so she does play that role well. But does she really contribute anything as an on-air, regular in-ring performer, character, whatever? So far, she really hasn't. She's been stuck in a storyline on fucking Rampage with Nyla Rose. She did challenge Toni Storm unsuccessfully on Wednesday's Dynamite for the AEW Women's World Championship, and what was an overall decent match. I don't know what her future holds. She probably will stick around in AEW, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But it's not as if she were to leave AEW and go back to WWE, because their whole holdup for a number of years was, we won't clear you. But I think Saraya had even said that before she left WWE, or after her contract expired or whatever, before she was in talks with AEW, Triple H, I believe, had called her up and said, hey, would you want to wrestle? They were willing to clear her, or at least ease her back into the fold, or at least they would give it consideration. Now, that's not confirmed they would have let her wrestle, but they would have considered it. They would have at least considered it a bit stronger than compared to during the Vince regime when they were pretty seemingly set on her ever wrestling again. That being said, her in AEW can be a benefit if they were using her better, or if she was putting forth better performances in the ring. Not to say that she's awful by any means, but it's just been kind of lackluster. Can she improve? Can she find her footing? I don't know. It's been almost 2 years now, so it's not as if it's like the first couple of months in. She's not really wrestling every single week, and her body can't really allow her to do that anyway, given her neck status and stuff like that. So it's kind of a weird situation. But again, like I said, it's not as if she were to leave AEW and go right back to WWE, that they would be automatically willing to, push her, and she would be this, alternate, different performer than she's been in AEW in the last couple of years. It would probably be a lot of the same stuff. It would just be a different theme song with a different name. So it's not as if I don't think we would be getting a completely different Paige, or Saraya rather, than we've been getting in AEW since 2022. It probably would be a lot of the same stuff. So I think it's probably better for her to just stay where she's at. She may not be champion again, but there are still fresh feuds for her to have in that company. They just have to book her a bit better and make her mean a little bit more, and If she can go in there and have some, stronger matches, or be given the opportunity to go in there and have some quality matches, then maybe she can go in there and have a really, really good run. But we just have yet to see that so far in AEW. Now, speaking of AEW, as we wind down here with AEW All In 2024 predictions for this Sunday at Wembley Stadium. As it currently stands, this is the card. They will probably add more matches to the 0-hour buy-in, whatever you want to call it, the pre-show, in the coming days. The pre-show is like fucking 2 hours long. It either starts at 11 a.m. Eastern or 11:30. The actual show, the main card, starts at 1. And that was the case last year, and last year had like 3 or 4 matches on the pre-show. And like a random-ass segment with like fucking Big Show and Jeff Jarrett, maybe Grado, I think. I don't know. So my point is, I would not be surprised to see them add more stuff in the coming days, so just keep an eye out for that. But this is the card as it currently stands. I didn't read the Collision spoilers. I think they already taped Collision on Wednesday. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure they already taped it. And if they did, I don't know what the results of that show are and what else they added to the card. So, 0 hour, the only match announced so far for the pre-show, Chris Statlander and Stokely Hathaway versus Willow Nightingale and Tomohiro Ishii. Now, they announced the winners of this match will be able to determine the stipulation for Statlander and Nightingale at All Out 2 weeks later for the CMLL Women's World Championship. Chris Statlander beat Willow in that Eliminator match a couple of weeks back on Dynamite. I thought the third match or the fourth match, whatever it would have been, would have happened here on the show at All In, but they're going to save it for All Out instead, because the card's already stacked as it is, so I get it. I wasn't initially thrilled with it, but I get why they're doing it. I would rather them have the tag team match here than do the match at All Out, and, or rather, do the match here and have it be like fucking 5 minutes or 10 minutes on the pre-show. They do deserve more time and more focus, and hopefully they do get that at the All Out pay-per-view in a couple of weeks. This one could go either way. Honestly, it's pretty funny. This is probably the most unpredictable match on the entire show. I do think Statlander could ultimately beat Willow in a couple of weeks at All Out, so if that's the case, I could see Willow and Ishii winning here. Hathaway probably should not be beating a team that consists of Willow Nightingale and Tomohiro Ishii. I mean, that would give them good heel heat, but I'll go with Team Willow, but it really doesn't matter. They had a tag team match at Forbidden Door a couple of months ago, and I think Willow's team won that. I don't remember. So I'm going to say Willow wins here, and she is able to choose this stipulation for their match at All Out. Statlander could win, and that's fine. It doesn't really matter either way. The Casino Gauntlet match. This is their third Casino Gauntlet in about 4 months. They did one coming out of Dynasty, I believe, or maybe coming out of Revolution. I think it was coming out of Dynasty, because Ospreay won the Casino Gauntlet and then went on to win the International Championship, I think at Forbidden Door, or maybe Double or Nothing. So they did one in April, and then they did another one. I think Ospreay won both of them, right? Because I think he won the Casino Gauntlet to face Roderick Strong at Double or Nothing, and then he won another Casino Gauntlet to face Swerve Strickland for the AEW World Championship at Forbidden Door. So they did one like a month later. Both were won by Will Ospreay, if I'm remembering correctly. Will Ospreay is not in this one, so he's not in the odds-on favorite for this matchup. They have announced that Mark Briscoe will be in there, Orange Cassidy, Kyle O'Reilly, Evil Uno, Adam Page, and a number of other people. The last 2 Casino Gauntlet matches on Dynamite were actually really, really good, so I am looking forward to this matchup. I think the most obvious pick has got to be Adam Page. The winner of this match does earn a future opportunity, probably at All Out, I would have to take a guess, at the AEW World Championship. And we should be getting Adam Page and Swerve again, whether it's for the championship or not. But I could totally see Adam Page facing Swerve for the title again at some point down the road. Maybe he earns the opportunity. Swerve loses the championship, gets it back, whatever the case might be. I do think Hangman's winning here. Last chance match for the FTW Championship, as if anyone gives a shit, but it's going to be Chris Jericho versus Hook again. A 6-month feud. Jericho has talked about how great it's been and how it's really elevated Hook, even though Hook's been in the same fucking level on this show for the last 2 years. He was challenging and defending that FTW Championship 2 years ago. He has won the thing 3 times. This will be his 4th, I believe. Who gives a shit at this point? You know what I mean? Like, who even cares? So I do think he will get the belt back. I would rather he lose, and then he can never challenge for the championship as long as Jericho is champion. But I know that's not going to happen. Jericho won the title, so Hook could eventually dethrone him for it, and that will happen here. I do think we get a new FTW champion in Hook for the 3rd or 4th time. The aforementioned London ladder match, I mentioned this earlier when talking about the Lucha Bros and how they probably would have been a logical addition to the match alongside Pac. Pac will probably still be in the match alongside Claudio and Wheeler Yuta. No, the pairing makes no fucking sense. Maybe they will explain it. I don't know. It is their way, I would imagine, of getting Pac on the show. So, yeah, it should be a crazy match. I mean, this is like fucking 12 people at once. 3, 3, 3, and 3. It's going to be the Patriarchy's Christian Cage, Killswitch, and Nick Wayne defending against the House of Blacks, Buddy Murphy, Malachi Black, and Brody King. And the Bang Bang Gangs, Juice Robinson, and the Guns. And then probably Pac and Claudio and Yuta. It could be Top Flight and Leo Rush. Very possible. I think it's more likely Pac is in there so they can get him on the show. They could have just put him in the Casino Gauntlet, but he already has a title shot in his back pocket for the International Championship, so they probably don't want to put him in another number one contenders match. I mean, this is also for a championship, but at least he's competing for a championship and not for a number one contender spot. That makes sense. But anyway, I feel like the Patriarchy, they just won the belts. Keep the belts on them. House of Black, we've seen with the belts before. Bang Bang Gang, same thing. Keep the belts in the Patriarchy and just move on. Coffin match for the AEW TNT Championship. Jack Perry defending against Darby Allin. This should be a really entertaining match, I think. The build has left a lot to be desired. It's been pretty simple, straightforward stuff. But I think the match will be good. I got Jack Perry going over, the AEW TNT champion. They've made it a point to bring up how Darby Allin is undefeated in coffin matches. He beat Brody King, I think, in a coffin match. He won a coffin match, casket match, whatever they called it, at All In last year alongside Sting against Christian Cage and Swerve, actually. And, I think he loses here because Darby doesn't need the TNT Championship. Jack Perry just won it 2 months ago. They could put the belt back on Darby. For what, though? It wouldn't really accomplish anything, so keep the championship on Jack Perry. AEW TBS Championship, Mercedes Moné versus Britt Baker. The feud, you talk about feuds that have left a lot to be desired. This is one of them. I mean, it started strong, really cooled off there for a while, and not just because Britt was suspended in storyline and in real life. They just didn't really have a lot going on that was exciting until this past week. I thought on Dynamite they had a very good contract signing, some very good verbiage and promos from both of the women, so I thought it was a much more effective job of selling people on the match at the pay-per-view than whatever else they've been doing for the past 2 months. But I think the match will also be very good. Now, Moné just became TBS champion. Not just, I mean, she has been TBS champion since Double or Nothing in May. She could lose it, but I feel like there's more to gain from Baker being in chase mode as opposed to her immediately beating Moné for the championship. You could also set up Jamie Hayter coming back and challenging Moné instead, or as well at some point. But I guess the report was, not the report, but the current rumor is that Britt and Jamie Hayter aren't really on great terms personally, and maybe they won't be working with each other on the show, so maybe that won't be happening. It would be great to see Jamie Hayter pop up on the show, whether it be here or after the Women's World Championship match, which would make less sense, I feel like, to immediately transition into Mariah May and Jamie Hayter, because I do think Mariah May is going over. I think it would make more sense for Moné to go over here and Jamie Hayter to come out and challenge Moné either at All Out or at some other point down the road, and she gets the big reaction from the England crowd, which is where she's from. We'll see if that actually happens, but I do see either, regardless of whether Jamie Hayter comes back or not, I do see Mercedes Moné successfully retaining the AEW TBS Championship here. AEW World Tag Team titles, the Young Bucks, FTR, and the Acclaimed. It should be a quality match, but this tag team division desperately needs some new life. Like an injection of excitement, and I don't know what that would be. All three teams are very good, but the Bucks feel like they're on autopilot right now. FTR, we've seen them in this spot a lot against the Bucks. It's nothing really new at this point. I'm ready to move on from that feud. And the Acclaimed are as cold as fucking ice. I mean, they got to turn heel or something. Their shtick has been stale for a while now, so I really don't give a fuck who wins. I would probably prefer to see FTR win, because they're just the more interesting team. They can give us better matches. Not that the Bucks are bad, but again, like I said, they've been on autopilot, it feels like, for a very long time now. At least since coming back as heels. And maybe that's the point. I don't know, in the spring. But I do see the Bucks retaining here, since it is a triple threat match and they can get away with stealing the win. Maybe after FTR and the Acclaim take each other out, they swoop in, steal the win, retain the titles. AEW Women's World Championship, I mentioned this before, Toni Storm and Mariah May. I do see Mariah May becoming champion, as she should. They've done a great job of the storyline since late last year, having Mariah May be brought in, be the protege of Toni Storm, now turning on her, taking that championship ideally here. I feel like that just makes the most sense. I think the match will be great, and they've done a really good job with the feud on TV, but I do think it culminates with a Mariah May win on this show, and her becoming the new AEW Women's World Champion. AEW American Championship, MJF and Will Ospreay, the former international title, obviously. I think Will Ospreay gets his moment at Wembley. I mean, he did last year technically by beating Chris Jericho, but this is a much more high-profile match, much higher-profile match than that one. It should also be a great match. Their first match on Dynamite, the hour-long match that went like 59 minutes and 58 seconds or whatever it was a fantastic match, one of the best in Dynamite history. And this is up there as one of the best as well. Or could be up there as far as one of the best in MJF's career in AEW. So I could see Ospreay. I do see Ospreay getting the belt back. Because remember, like I said earlier, Pac is still owed a shot at that international championship. They could do Pac and MJF. I mean, that's totally fine. But I see Pac and Ospreay being more likely for All Out than MJF and Ospreay. And they can always go back to MJF and Ospreay for the October show, for Wrestle Dream if they want to. But I do see Ospreay getting the belt back here in his home country. And then we get to the main event, the title versus career match for the AEW World Championship, Swerve Strickland and Bryan Danielson. If Bryan Danielson loses, he has vowed to never wrestle again. Now, I find that very hard to believe because even though he has said his run is coming to an end in AEW, he has specifically said that he will continue to wrestle even though his full-time career is over, whether it be occasionally or once a year, once every couple years, whatever the fuck, and also wrestle probably wherever he wants. And not only that, but he has made many claims over the years that he intends to wrestle until he can't anymore. Wrestle until the day that he dies or whatever. So I would be very surprised, and I doubt he would break his promise of losing here and then going on to wrestle again. That would be pretty dumb. I think it's a lot more likely. I feel like they foreshadowed the finisher by having Danielson say that he is retiring soon. By having him say, I will never wrestle again, which we know is probably not true. More than likely not true. I feel like that gives away the finish and that Swerve's going to lose. And Swerve losing is fine. I think Danielson can get his moment, close out the show as the new world champion, and he's never won the AEW World Championship before. I do feel like, and I've said this before, Swerve would have more to gain from winning that match than Danielson. I feel like it would have meant more for Danielson to lose here, and then maybe to win it for a quick run at Wrestle Dream, or retire as champion like Sting did. Or leave as champion, whatever. I feel like that would have made more sense. Because I think Wrestle Dream is in his home state of Washington. He hasn't said, he did say, my contract was up on August 1st, blah, blah, blah. They could sign a 2-month extension. If they signed a 3-week extension, they could sign a 2-month extension. And he's also being advertised for some of those shows in Washington in a couple of months. Now, they could take him off the advertising. But it is weird they would already be advertising if they don't know if he's going to wrestle at that point in storyline. So, all of that to say, I think Danielson wins here. New world champion. Hopefully we do get a rematch. Jack Perry... Is it Jack Perry? No, rather Darby Allin won the Royal Rampage match a few weeks ago. So he is owed a world championship shot at Grand Slam. I could see that being against Danielson. That's a first-time ever matchup. That would be cool. At All Out, I could see it being... I don't know, but I could see it being Swerve again at Wrestle Dream, though. I could see Danielson getting like a month, 5-6 week long run where he defends it All Out, he defends at Grand Slam, and then he loses it back to Swerve at Wrestle Dream in early October. I could totally see that happening. In their home state of Washington, he puts him over, and that's it for his retirement tour. I feel like that's more likely. If he loses here, I'd be shocked. I just don't think that's going to happen. And that's all in for Sunday. It does look like a very good card on paper. It looks like an even better card than last year. The build has been much better than last year, but the attendance is down. The build is one part of it. Last year, the card or the show was near sold out, like they said, around 80, 90,000, whatever, before a single match was even fucking announced. But that was, again, because of the historical nature of the show. Now, this is the second one. Is it the law of diminishing returns? I do think it is, and also in addition to the fact, the buzz around the product is not quite what it was. Even a year ago, and you're losing people like, Punk's not on the card this year, Omega's not there, Okada's not wrestling, which he's active, they just don't have him on the card. Moxley's not there right now. There's a few people that they still have out. Jamie Hayter is an English native, obviously, an England native, and she's not advertised for the show. She won't, she could be there, but she's not wrestling as of right now, so... They still have a lot of missing talent. Edge being another one. He got hurt a couple of months ago. He won't be on the show. So they're missing a couple big names. The build has been better. The buzzer on the product isn't what it was even a year ago. So I could see why the attendance is down. But hopefully it's still pretty strong for this year and for next year in Dallas. I don't think it'll come close to the 40,000 mark, but maybe it will, and I'm wrong. I don't know. Time will tell. But I am looking forward to Sunday. It does air at 1 p.m. Eastern, so I'll be camping this weekend. I don't know what my recording schedule will look like as far as recording SmackDown and that sort of stuff over the weekend, but I am hoping to watch the pay-per-view live, and we'll talk about it right here on the show next week with a hopefully rehabilitated Mr. Marceau, who, like I said earlier, is feeling under the weather, and hopefully he's back next week, and wishing him all the best. You can check out new episodes of WrestleRant Radio every single Thursday on WrestleRant.com, WrestleRantRadio.com. Rate the show, review the show, subscribe to the show. Never miss a new episode on all of your favorite podcast platforms. Have an awesome one, folks. I'm Graham G.S. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.
Join Graham GSM Matthews and RJ Marceau every Thursday as they run down their weekly wrestling rants, offer expert analysis, host exclusive interviews, and more. Subscribe today on all your favorite podcast platforms and never miss an episode of WrestleRant Radio.